Hi everyone, and welcome to this important event on gender equality in the Nordic blue economy. My name is Carolina Kihlström, and I am the Managing Director of the Swedish organization Maritime Forum. And I have the great honor to guiding us through today's session. And the blue and maritime sectors are at the heart of the Nordic economy and its sustainability goals. However, if we are to secure a thriving and inclusive future for these sectors, they must embrace gender equality. And earlier this year, Nordregio released the report Ensuring Gender Equality in the Nordic Blue Economy. And the report presents a picture of the gender disparity across various maritime sectors, highlighting not only women's underrepresentation, but also the structural challenges they face. And today we will discuss these challenges, but mostly focusing on solutions and recommendations with experts and practitioners who are actively shaping gender equality in the maritime sector. And our aim today is to turn insights into action, exploring how we can build an inclusive and gender equal environment within the maritime and blue economy. And if you have any questions today, please send them to us by using the chat. And Louise Öglund, next to me, will collect all your questions, and our speakers will try to answer as many as possible.
Hi everyone, warm welcome to this webinar. Like Carolina said, I will be moderating the chat, so please pop all your questions and reflections in, and I will pass them on.
And in the chat, we will also post some links to some of the research reports mentioned here today. And for your information, the webinar will also be recorded, so you can see it many times. And you can also spread the word afterwards. And today you will hear a presentation from Cecilia Österman, she will share insights on her research in the area, and we will also have a panel discussion with leaders and experts across the Nordic blue economy. But first, to set the stage with the presentation of the report findings from the report Ensuring Gender Equality in the Nordic Blue Economy, I'd like to welcome Anna Karlsdottir from Nordregio and the University of Iceland. A warm welcome.
Thank you, Carolina. And so nice to see everybody here today. So I was the project manager on behalf of Nordregio for this project, and I also must mention that this was actually a front-runner project for the Nordic Council of Ministers, in the sense that it was one among the first ones that was financed across sectors within the Nordic Council of Ministers. And this was funded by the Commission of Officials for Gender Equality and LGBTQ issues, and the fishery sector, the Fisk, as they call it, the Commission for Fisheries sector in the Nordic Council of Ministers. So I'm here mainly to bring you the main takeaways from this report that we did launch in January 2024 at Arctic Frontiers. It was a big pleasure, and I dare to say that we received quite a positive response on the report. And our primary focus is the gender perspective, and we stress that the notion of gender, women, or equality, with very few exceptions, is almost completely absent from blue bioeconomy literature, and this is certainly something we need to do something about. It's a challenge for securing local communities along the coast in the Nordic region. Now, what data is there? That is one of the main issues. We were set to collect data, statistical data in different areas, and What we found was cross or comparative data on women as manpower in Nordic fisheries and aquaculture. They represented 6 to 20% of the manpower. But and if I just go at glance, the data reveals a very gender segregated labor market. The highest number or presence of women has been historically in the fisheries industries, but that number is on the decline. And we see a particularly low ratio of women active as fishers in the sector. And this was actually one of the things that mobilized the launch of this project, because there's a general wish in the Nordic countries to see this change. Now we also see low ratio of women in decision-making positions in general and in the maritime sector, and then in aquaculture, where we've only been able to explore the largest companies. They have in some cases more equal gender ratio on their boards and in their direction. But I dare to say that in general what we found was that data to compare there was revealing gender ratio in different fields was very sporadic, and this was a main problem of ours during this project process. And in some cases, some of these data collected was not anymore under responsibility of national statistics, but had been diverted to other institutions. So it represented very much a lack of comparability of data across the Nordic region. And this is absolutely something we need to see change. Now, in general, I would also say that empowering women in the maritime sector is not only about jobs or employment, it's about creating equal opportunities for leadership and decision making. And when it comes to employment, we have maps that show the change over a decade from 2010 to 2020 on the right. And we can see some changes, but this data is on a very aggregate level, so it does not reveal the regional variations that there may be, and that may be even more interesting. But we did not simply have the opportunity to find data on this to an extent to show on a map. Now, and if we then look at the change over a decade in one map, then we can see some slight increase of more equal gender ratio in Faroe Islands, in Denmark, but the changes are not really fantastic, to be honest. When we when we explored aquaculture, we also see a gender disaggregated labor market, but there seems to be a mentality that encourages women to leading position, both in terms of initiatives, and we can also see that reflected in some of the individual companies' aspirations and work for equality. One of the things that we were asked to do when we worked on this project was to have the radar open on harassment culture. And to be honest, this was actually something that surprised us in terms of the degree. But we have Cecilia, who is going to tell us more about this. But I want to say that when I looked into the literature and research on this, I could see that historically there's been a culture of masculinity, sarcasm, sexist attitudes towards women that are employed through dark humor and rough competitive atmosphere. And so this is absolutely one of the fields that need to be explored further. Now, in terms of education, we know that women outnumber men in educational merits, and this is no new knowledge. But there are some interesting gender variations when it comes to education and educational directions, and also how women use the educational merits to, for instance, get license and own a boat. In general, they have much shorter careers than their male peers. And we also see that in marine-related vocational and secondary education, the ratio is low, but it is about to change in some areas, and there are some very high dropout rates in some of the countries. For the tertiary education, that is universities and higher educations, we have only been able to compile data that allows us for more qualitative guesswork, unfortunately. And we see less women in more technical fishery-related educations, but more in fields like maritime biology or interdisciplinary educations like coastal and marine management. Now, if we take a look at these two maps, the first one is from 2012 and the second one is a decade later, 2022. We have a comparative map over the Nordic region, and we can actually see over 10 years that there's been slight increase in share of women enrolled in vocational tertiary education. But I must also reveal, sorry, this was a mistake. I must also reveal that these numbers are very small, the changes, so they skew a bit the statistics, but Iceland shows a bit of an increase, Greenland as well, Sweden and Denmark, whereas Norway and Finland are more pale. When it comes to leadership and innovations, we can also see that men make decisions even when women are working in research and innovation. We know they are pivotal in these parts of the sector. And we see them in numbers, leading innovative activities, new initiatives, but we can also see a pattern where we see that women have more limited financial or agenda-setting influence, and this may also need to change. So, 2 actions, and now I'm gonna really be fast. What we need to do is we need to promote women's impact, educate business leaders and policymakers about equality and women's contribution, especially highlighting their leadership and entrepreneurial impact. We need to increase women's participation in Nordic fishing industry. We need to recruit more women as fishers and boat owners and help them stay longer in these roles. And we need to promote awareness of women's importance in the sector and work to change attitudes about their capabilities. And we need to improve gender data in Nordic blue economy. There's need to improve data on gender representation in the Nordic blue economy, accounting for women's contribution. And, we should also enhance women's education and representation, their involvement in maritime education and the industry to ensure gender equality and highlight diverse positive role models. And we need to combat discrimination. We need to make the maritime and shipping industry more attractive, and if we are going to do that, it's crucial to fight discrimination and sexual harassment and promote fair working conditions at sea. So, in general, more research is needed on women's role in leadership and decision-making in fisheries, aquaculture and the maritime sector, especially regarding access to financial power and policy influence. And then lastly, I want to stress that it is in all of the Nordic countries' interest to promote and develop a sustainable Nordic region. we should promote sustainability where we include biodiversity in ocean governance. This is very crucial. Our region should aim at securing gender equality with meaningful and informed participation and leadership. And by that, I think I'm done, and I'm really looking forward to hear from our participants.
Thank you so much, Anna, for a very interesting presentations. And don't forget that you can ask questions to Anna in the chat. But while they're writing their questions, I have a question for you as well.
Yes.
And I wonder which of these recommendations are most important?
Yes.
If there were somewhere we should start.
I'm as a researcher, it's really hard for me to just say one thing, so I better say three things. I think it's really, really important to promote positive gender roles in leadership positions in the different arenas within the sector. And I hope that this webinar can be part of that, because there's some really kicking participants with us today. But I think it is food for thought that Norway is the only country where the authorities have actually allocated funding to promote gender equality in the fisheries and to promote these positive role models. So the other Nordic countries, they need to sharpen up. And then I think the data issue is really crucial if we are to have a good, adequate knowledge about the status. And then the third, I think something really needs to be done with a mentality that cultures this harassment or toxic male culture in some parts of the industry.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Anna. We will take this with us in the discussion forward. So now we will move on with our program, and our next speaker is Cecilia Österman from the Kalmar Maritime Academy at Linnaeus University. And you will share the findings from your research concerning these issues. A warm welcome.
Thank you very much. So I will build upon what we just heard recently, and since a lot of it is the same, I think I'll skip that part and dive into more to other contributions that we've done. And first, I'm going to present some recent research that has been done within a network called the Sisters in the Arctic Blue Network. It's founded by the Nordic Council of Ministers. So it's another research network that has been working parallel with your network that we have just learned about. And we have just published an article called Hindered, Overlooked and Undervalued Gender Equality in the Nordic Blue Economies. And it's within the journal Ocean and Society, a special issue that is dedicated into the gendered blue. So all the articles within this issue is published with open access, so you can access it without any paywalls. And just a very quick shout out to my fellow members of the Sisters in the Arctic Blue Network and co-authors of this article. So it's researchers from universities in Sweden, Denmark, Finland, and Norway. So thank you if you're here. So very briefly, so this article presents a purposive interdisciplinary literature review that aimed to introduce and discuss gender equality in the blue economy, just very similar to what we just heard here, and also to try to assess the status of gender research in the Nordic context. And so the findings of the current contemporary research is analyzed through this lens of women being hindered, overlooked and undervalued, the work they're doing. And of course, all three of these factors work together. So sometimes it's several of them or all three of these factors. And just very briefly to go through, so what are the hindered? So hindered are barriers that are there for the hinders the barriers of women's entry and also retention in the blue economy that hinders women's participation in a greater sense within the blue economy. In here, there's this common misconception that women are sort of new to the blue economy or the maritime industry, but this is of course not true. Women have participated since the beginning of time, but rather women's contribution and participation has largely been ignored also in historical narratives. And we have seen some recent initiatives to combat this, to increase the visibility of women, which I think is great. And I just want to give a little tips about this women in maritime history that is done, sponsored by Lloyd's Register, which I think it's very interesting. I can perhaps send you a link later, Louise, to share that. Other examples of barriers are the linguistic barriers, and that could be seen as perhaps a sort of how serious could that be? But they are exclusionary. For instance, what is a seaman, a fisherman, and from a linguistic perspective, you can see that, for instance, the title seaman and fisherman, they are experienced as rather exclusionary, both for women but also for non-binary persons. And the terms might seem harmless, but it also makes children that tend to make gender-specific interpretation of job titles. Who can become a seaman or a fisherman if it has an end as a man in the end of it? I think only Iceland has gendered titles here, and Greenland has a genderless title, but there is no word for fisherwoman, for instance. We can see in the legislation when it comes to the maritime industry that both the IMO at international level and Sweden, for instance, at national level has replaced these titles within the regulations, but they're commonly used still. Another example of a barrier is the work-life balance. It can be difficult to combine work in the blue sector with family life, since women still have the biggest responsibility for family life, for children in the private arena at home. And as we just heard also, there is also a quite significant problem, I would say, with workplace bullying and harassment within the blue economies, and I'll come back to that. And overlooked, that means that women are not viewed as a legitimate part of the blue economy. There are problems with access to privileges, that women are not granted ownership or control, for instance, inheritance of fisher quota. And on a practical level, again, we are looking at these seemingly small things that still are so important. There is a lack of available working garments when it's no gloves or working clothes on board available in the right sizes. Also lack of available safety equipment, personal protective equipment, which can be quite serious actually. And also the lack of hygiene products and facilities or personal space, which also can be difficult. So how do I dispose of hygiene products when I'm on board, for instance, without it being visible for all my colleagues to see? And the undervalued lens that women's contributions to the blue economy are not recognized. So there's a lot, as I said, women has been taking part and contributed throughout the history to the blue economy, but it's just not seen. A lot of work is largely unpaid, and it's also invisible. One example of that is a fishery. Maybe we'll heard more about that from Hanna, but there's a fishing community in Norway that have a very important festival each year that is very important for the community, and that is largely arranged and make sure it happens by women's unpaid labor. And there are also feminized working conditions, where an example from the maritime industry that the work that where the women are found are also perceived as less of a seafarers. For instance, the catering staff, the people working in the hotel, restaurant, and bar departments on passenger ferries are not always seen as seafarers, and their work is not valued as much as the more male-dominated work done by the deck crew and the engine crew. So that's just a brief introduction to this, to the barriers that we can see, and from that I will continue to dive into this issue regarding the workplace bullying and harassment at sea. And this is based on a structured literature review that I've done with my colleague Magnus Boström at Linnaeus University. This article is also available open access, and I know that Louise has the link so she can share it. And as you may know, there's a plethora of terms and concepts used in this respect. So just quickly go through some definitions here. And bullying at work is generally used for repeated and regular activities of processes and behavior. And when we talk about bullying, we often mean stuff that's going on for a prolonged period of time. And examples of bullying can be harassing, offending, socially excluding of someone. And it also often includes some kind of power balance here that reflects either formal structures, formal hierarchical structures at the workplace, managers, crew, for instance, or informal power structures. That, of course, is gender, age, for instance. When we look at harassment, and in employment law, harassment commonly refers to the acts of discrimination based on any of the protected class or characteristics. For instance, in Sweden, there are 7 different grounds of discrimination that can pose harassment. And the exact scope of this, it varies between countries, but it can be of either physical and or psychological. So in our study, we encompass all these definitions summarized in what we can call some kind of uncivilized behavior or unwanted behavior. And it can be sexual harassment or other kinds of harassments, bullying, workplace violence, victimization, mobbing, or any kind of unwanted attention of this. But what I really want to make clear is that workplace bullying and harassment, uncivilized behaviors, does not occur at any workplace, may it be in the blue economy or otherwise, just because people are idiots. I mean, there are some idiots in our workplace, and the last one is probably not born yet, but it's not that simple. We know from a lot of research that workplace bullying and harassment occur in workplaces when we have shortcomings in the organizational and social work environment. So here are just some common known risk factors from the maritime industry, which we have investigated. So we have long working hours, it's sustained high workloads, it's difficult to have this clear separation between work and rest and the professional and private arena. There are also quite often role conflicts and conflicting demands. For instance, we need to work safely, but also it should be quick, and it's not allowed to cost anything. We also have example of poor leadership and experiences of various kinds of organizational injustice, for instance. And in our study, we searched for all research that has been published ever in this respect. And we saw that the first study was published scientifically peer-reviewed at 1995. And if we synthesize all this research, we see that bullying and harassment is a substantial problem in the maritime industry. We see that between 8 and 25% of all seafarers has experienced some kind of bullying harassment at work. And when we look at women seafarers, over 50% has experienced some kind of bullying and harassment at work. Of course, the inconsistent use of construct, as I said previously, can make comparisons of prevalence quite difficult. But we can see that it is a substantial problem. And more importantly, I would say, we can also see in this mass of research that the manager, the boss, is most often the perpetrator. And I think this is, of course, not reflecting that we have Captain Satan has signed on and trying to steer the ship here. I think this rather reflects the rather difficult working conditions that managers often have on board ships. They also have a lack of tools, a lack of resources, lack of knowledge. So they're not really equipped and able to manage these instances. And it's also clear that this is not a reporting issue. We could see in the wake of the Me Too movement that there was a lot of shouting out there. So, oh, why hasn't the women reported this? And when we ask the women to report circumstances, occurrences of workplace bullying and harassment, we are placing all the responsibility on the individual woman. And that is not how we can do it. That's not how we're solving it. And that is not how we would solve any other safety issue on board. I mean, of course, we will follow the safety management system that require us to proactively go out and investigate, analyze, and take measures if we identify any kind of safety issue that may endanger the ship, the people, or the environment. So why would we place the entire responsibility on the individual woman? I mean, that doesn't make sense. So it's not a reporting issue, it's a safety issue, and it should be treated as such. And in that respect, we already have a lot of legislation in place. We have a lot of international legislation that has been translated into regional but also national legislation at EU level and flag state level. So this should be treated within the safety management systems. But as we can see, and also as we heard previously here, there is currently still a gap between the policy and the enforcement, and also what we know. We are simply not using the knowledge that we have to put it actually in practice. So I would say we don't need more legislation necessary, but we have to enforce the legislation and implement the knowledge that we already have. So the way forward there, we need a shift from policy to practice, stop talking, start doing, and use the knowledge that we have, scale up the good practices, learn from each other, and also cooperate, cross-disciplinary and also cross-sectors. We also have, as we also already heard today, we have to increase the visibility. And also when it comes to research efforts, of course, as researchers, we always want more money so we can do more fun research. But here I would actually say that we don't need more, we don't necessarily need more research to tell us that it's a problem or whether it's a problem or not, because we know that. We know it's a problem. So we need more research that evaluates the good practices so we can see what works for whom and under which circumstances. And here we need to work at different levels. We need to work at the individual level, of course, empowering women, empowering managers, but also work at the meso level within the organizations to make sure that there is knowledge. And also outside, for instance, this picture is from the maritime industry. So here, of course, we also have to work at a macro level to make sure that also the transport buyers ask questions regarding this. And I won't go through the entire article, but I just want to go back to some of the risk factors that I said. So if we know from a lot of research within the blue economy domain, but also from other domains, that these are some known risk factors for inequality, but also gender and sexual harassment. We know that these are some risk factors. Then we can see that a lot of them are actually, they are not just serendipitous. These things don't just happen out of the blue. I mean, these are actual job design choices. we can actively, perhaps not us, but decision makers, CEOs can actively design on this. We can design and decide what it is regarding the job demands. What are our working schedules? How long duration at sea do we work? How do we plan and organize the shift work? Do we have more leadership, or can we empower the managers? Precarious workers hired on short-term contract. That's another example of a job design choice that we can make. So we have to improve the organizational justice within, especially the maritime industry, but also in other sectors within the blue economy, to establish fair working conditions, as we know that this is a breeding ground for workplace bullying and harassment. We also have to train supervisors in employee participation and interpersonal interaction, improve the work environment on board, and also raise the professional status of hotel department crews on cruise ship, for instance. And of course, work with implementations that we actually know. And we have all talked about this visibility, and here I just want to finish up my presentation with the importance again about role models, representation and inspiration. We have seen a lot of talking in this respect, that everybody agrees that this is important, but we can also see that walking the talk, there we have some steps to go. So we mustn't underestimate the effects of role models. And if we don't have any diversity to fix, we have to fix it. I mean, this picture here, I don't know if you can see it, but this is actually from a conference in 2022 from the cruise industry, and that's where the women work. So how come there are no women working in the cruise industry that has anything interesting to say at the conference regarding the cruise industry? So we have to review the representation at all levels, just the board, the managers, the employee, and say no to manels. That is my last message. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cecilia, for a very interesting presentation. I think there's a lot of things we can take with us from this presentation. And you will also stay with us for the panel discussions. If you have questions for Cecilia, you can write them in the chat. And now let's bring out all our panelists into the conversation, and I will briefly introduce each of them before we dive into our questions. And we have with us Clara Sjögos, which is a research specialist at the Iceland Ocean Cluster. We have Hanna Arctander, leader of Norges Kystfiskarlag, and we have Elin Kristensson, CEO of the Northern Offshore Services. A warm welcome to all of you for being here, and I believe there is no time for small talk, so we will dive straight into the issues that we need to talk about. And we heard a lot of challenges here, both from Anna and Cecilia, but I would like to hear from you as well what you believe are the greatest challenges. Elin, would you like to start?
Hi everyone. Thank you for letting me be part of this. Amazing, so interesting also from the recent speakers. The greatest challenge, I would say, is, of course, as always, it's leadership and culture. This is what all, industries from tech to shipping to all these traditional male-focused industries has. It's that the women came now, they are in schools, they get good scores, and then, of course, we have trouble to keep them in the industries because due to culture and to poor leadership. One thing that I know is that when women strive, we don't strive alone. It's in our DNA to lift each other up. So the women now in leadership position needs to be visible. We need to actually step up and speak out. What do we need to create a better culture in our companies, and also to lift other women up into other leadership positions. We need to be clear of what we stand for and what we actually expect from our employees. Because, if you look at our countries, we are the most equal area in the world, but still we are so behind in equal pace, equal whatever. So I mean, more women in leadership positions will probably solve it automatically and also quicker than the pace that we are in now. So I feel like actions for the culture, clear routines and policies, and also to actually follow them up. That is my answer. So culture is the biggest one that we need to sort out.
Thank you so much. Clara, what do you say?
Yeah, so actually I thought it was very interesting, and I could, I don't know, I resonated with a lot of the things that were said. And one thing especially that I want to bring up, and I think it was in the comments as well, when it comes to, the underrepresentation of women as fishers, is really the fact that this job is really rough and it's very difficult to manage a life, work-life balance. It's almost impossible. And I think that really, because women have such critical roles in the communities we live in, having them at sea for undetermined, periods of time is just almost, it's definitely a problem. And I think that's one of the reasons why women are not found within the fisheries really as fishers. And yeah, I think if we increase or improve the standards for these types of jobs, I think we will see changes.
Yeah, thank you so much. Hannah, what do you believe are the greatest challenges at the moment?
Yeah, thank you. I also resonate with a lot of what has been said here. Of course, the culture, this is a very male-dominated field, and so the industries, reflects that. And as Ellen said, I think, one way to solve that is having women in leadership position, but also just having generally more women in the industry. And that being said, so, one part of that is recruiting more women into the industry. And I think that is something that, especially, I can only speak for the industry in Norway, we are on the path to, doing a better job at that. And then there's the second part of it, which is what Clara has mentioned, it's getting them to stay in the industry. Because it can be easy to, make them apply to blue economy education and work, but getting them to stay, and especially combining the fishing life with family life is very difficult. And so what we have been working on in this organization is, all those, like Cecilia mentioned earlier, all these like small challenges that come up in, the daily life of being a fisherman, that makes it difficult to combine it with family life. And it can be, working long hours. It can be, we've been working a lot about the policy and the regulatory frameworks that regulate the fishing industry that makes it difficult to combine with family life. So I think, one thing is, the culture side of it, and then the other part is sort of designing the profession in a way that makes it viable to be a woman in the industry.
Thank you, Hannah. I wonder, Cecilia, do you want to comment anything that you heard now?
No, I agree. But then we also have to really see the as you said, it's not enough just to recruit. We have to make sure that people stay, and also because sometimes in of course not in forum like this, but sometimes I hear a discussion that it sounds like gender equality is some kind of apple pie, that if you get a bigger piece, I will get a smaller piece, and that is of course not true, because in this respect we know that if we improve working conditions to better fit also women, to make them interested in this and also to stay, we know that it makes it better also for men, especially young men, and we want to recruit them as well. So not only talking about attracting and recruiting, but also retaining and letting people grow.
Thank you so much. And I'm thinking on that note, what are the immediate steps that we need to take to ensure gender equality? I was thinking, Elin, from your perspective, what do we need to do?
That was the best question. Yes, I actually have the answers. No, but we 1 year ago, it was really on the agenda. It started to raise everywhere in the shipping industry. Wherever we went, we talked about this, and there are so many people, interesting in actually making this better. And this is, of course, because we have a problem that we can see in a few years with lack of competence. We don't have the people that we will need for our industry that actually is growing. So what we did is that Northern Offshore Services, the company that I work on, we invited over 100 women in different maritime industry parts, from the suppliers, shipping companies, legislation people, everybody we know that could have a say in this. What do we need to do? So we gathered in our office, and we actually had a workshop where we created something called the Equality in Shipping list. It's an action list for the maritime industry where we have different headlines and different actions for companies to choose from to actually create a difference in their own culture. So what a company needs to do is to look inwards. Are we the company that we would like to be? Are we taking a stand? Do we have the policies? If not, if there is a gap, you can look at the list and see what kind of actions would suit our company in this industry. And there can be for example, we're talking about this with the perpetrator, perhaps can be the captain on the vessels where you actually work. And of course, then it's very hard to raise an issue about harassment if that person is the one actually doing the harassment. So for example, in this list, you can see that if you have female ambassadors in your company, always calling the women on board the vessels and say, if there is anything happening, if you need to ask something that you don't want to talk to with a man, then it's, you can call me. And so that you get that kind of introduction into the company. And also, of course, making the company aware of what kind of policy and what does our company stand for, and then create policies and routines how to act if something will happen, because we work in a international business. There are so many different cultures that we end up meeting, and how will we as a company act if somebody is harassed on one of our vessels, for example, or in the office. So we have a list called Equality in Shipping. You can find it on Instagram actually, or in LinkedIn. Carolina, you were part of creating it as well, and I'm so proud of it. So it's actually a list from how to act on board, how to act in the office, how should the information management, how should you recruit to make sure that women actually apply for these kinds of jobs. So there is so many good actions. I think it's 40 pointers for companies to actually act on. And it's just to, search for Equality in Shipping, and you will find it. And of course, we work with the different schools as well.
Chat, Elin.
Yes.
We will also post it in the chat.
Perfect. Yes.
You can find it. You can find
and you
it.
do that, Caroline. You're better than me at IT things.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Elin. Hannah,
Thank you.
What do you think are the immediate steps that we need to take? You mentioned a few of them before.
I just wanted to add to what Ellen just mentioned, because this is something that we've been discussing a lot, this problematic problem of, your employer being the one harassing you. And you're talking about it, from a shipping company point of view. The fleet that I represent are small fishing boats. So maybe you are just one other person on board. So maybe you are employed by one person who owns the boat, and that is the person harassing you. Who do you address with that, with those problems? So what we've been, asking of the government body for the Norwegian fishing industry is there a possibility to create an independent body where you can address these issues, because you cannot address them with the one person that is. And the fishing community is small, so if you leave this job, it will be harder to get a job with the next boat, because it's a very small and tight-knit community. So it's for us, it's a lot of kind of thinking outside of the box, because these problems haven't been addressed before. But it will be just as useful, as Cecilia said, for men as well, because of course these bullying problems doesn't just occur with women. So just wanted to have that perspective of how big the fishing industry is, and how different and unique bodies we have in this industry.
Thank you so much. Clara, do you want to add something?
To be honest, I don't have anything to add. on this particular topic. I think I'm just aware that in the fishing industry, on each fishing boat, they have like like a person that you can go talk to that will keep things anonymous. But that's valid for men and women, and because there's so few women, I doubt that these representatives are women. But yeah, so I'm not sure. Not sure I can add much on that.
Erin, you would like to comment as well?
Yes, I'm so proud of you for raising this issue in the fishing industry. Actually, I'm a fisherman's daughter, so I'm born into a big fishing family in Sweden. So I know exactly what you're talking about, and I feel like if you could create some kind of network in between these women actually working, so that you can support each other, just like a Facebook group or WhatsApp group or something like that. So that you have somebody to talk to, and of course, if you get the shipping association, perhaps in Norway, to be a supporting actor, I'm sure that they can help you to influence. And if you need to know people, you can call me. I will help you.
No, that's a really good idea, and I would suspect it exists, knowing the Icelandic people. And actually, it brings me to maybe a slightly different point, but it does exist, for example, for the aquaculture sector, where they definitely have a women in aquaculture kind of group. Actually, maybe I have a link about this, and coming back. Finally, maybe between the difference, but still within the blue economy between fishers and people working on aquaculture. I think aquaculture kind of allows for women to do this, work-life balance, or, manage it much better than what the fishing industry does. And so I think in Iceland, we've seen a lot more women in still not as many women as men, but much more women in the aquaculture sector than in the fisheries sector. So I think that's really good news. And because these are growing sector, or at least it is a growing sector in Iceland, I think that's quite hopeful would be the word. So yeah, I'll share the link about a news article with the Women Association.
If I can just add to this discussion, I was glad you mentioned that, because it does exist following the sort of Me Too movement in the fishing industry. A lot of female fishermen came together and started something called Hundfisker, or She's Fishing, which is like a network for and by female fishermen. And so I would just put it out there, if any of you want to sort of get involved with the female fishermen organization or support them. This is a really good organization to get in touch with them. What they have focused on actually is what you just mentioned, is networking, and also sort of education in terms of, the fishermen organization are quite strong in Norway in terms of influencing policy, but have historically been no women in these boards on these organizations. So it's kind of trying to do this bottom-up thing of, instead of just, putting women in these boards who maybe not have the experience or maybe really want to be there, to sort of educate them in how does an organization work, how do you get involved, how does the policy work, how do you influence it, and then, put them in touch with other female fishermen so they can, discuss topics relevant to them. So I would just like to give a shout out to that to that organization in Norway.
Thank you so much. And I see that we have questions from the audience. Louise, what questions do we have?
We have quite an active audience, which I'm happy to see. So I've tried to combine a few questions. Following up on the job design, can we redesign or rethink blue professions to make them more equal? And can we, maybe this is more to Cecilia, can we look at other male-dominated industries to see any differences or similarities on them? Thank you.
Yeah. To start with, yes, we can definitely learn from other male-dominated industries, because it's the same mechanisms. I know we have, at least within the shipping industry, we have this sort of tradition of not looking elsewhere because we are the best and we are so special, so we have absolutely nothing to learn. But of course, it's the same problems, and it's to a very large extent the same solutions. So yes. And also when it comes to the job design choices, I keep coming back to this. We have to ask ourselves, when it comes to at least to the maritime industry, we must ask ourselves, is the business model that we're having, does it allow for organizational justice? I mean, I sometimes argue that the maritime industry's business model is based on inequality. I mean, we source seafarers from different parts of the world compared to where the money ends up. So that could be a completely other webinar, but I'm just saying that we can and we should, because I mean, inclusion and gender equality doesn't happen through strategies and roadmaps and policy documents. It's something that we experience in the everyday work, in our interactions with the colleagues, over lunch, at the coffee machines, during meetings in work. So that's where it has to happen. We must do gender and make sure that we design our work and working conditions so it's possible to work in the line of all these nice policies and stuff that we want to happen. And in that respect, I just must ask, I mean, again, here's a bunch of women discussing this. Where are the men? We need also male allyship if we're going to succeed in this. This is not something that must be sorted out by the women.
Thank you, Cecilia. And I have one last question to all of you. If you could give any advice to decision makers or leaders on these matters, what would it be? Hannah, would you like to start?
Yeah, I think I'd go as easy as, involve women in the policy making and the boards and the leadership position, because they will, I promise you, spot a lot of challenges that are overlooked today in terms of how to get more equality in the fisheries industry. And if I may, this has been a big part of our work with the organization, is going through the regulatory framework and spotting all these what was mentioned earlier, these kind of tiny things, but that are very real to the women in the industry. These small rules or demands or regulatory frameworks that in the daily life makes it difficult to ensure gender equality. And so and you will not spot this until you have sort of a women at the table. So yeah.
Thank you. Clara?
Can I ask, what was your original question? I lost it. I'm so sorry.
Do you have any advice to decision makers or leaders in the maritime sector concerning these issues?
Difficult. I would say that I'm not a legal person whatsoever, but we've seen good policies, and I'm going to take the example that is very general out of the blue economy, but the parental leave, and I think it's across the Nordics where it's kind of split evenly between men and women. And I think that benefits everyone, women, regardless if they end up with a child or not, but also fathers and the children. And I find that, we need to think of, and coming back to what Cecilia said about having the men included in the discussion, finding clever policies that would benefit everyone in the end, in the end result. So for example, again, in the fisheries or at the aquaculture, raising the standards for these jobs in terms of, work-life balance, but also everything that actually Cecilia said in the risk factors, it would make a better world for the men and for the women, for everybody. So yeah, that would be.
Thank you so much. Cecilia, what are your advice?
All decision makers that want to change anything, they must also, with the nice documents, they also have to bring a bag of money and a bag of time. Things takes time. When middle managers are left on their own to sort of solve this problem, they will always have to priority the daily operations first before they can work on strategy works. It's always going to be some kind of little problem or disorder, stuff that needs to be solved first. So I think all of us always have our days full. So when there's a lot of extra new thing that we're supposed to do as well, it must be shown that you are allowed to do it. It's allowed to take time to do this, and here's the money for it.
Thank you. Elin, the last word.
All right, so much to say. All right, what I can see now in the shipping industry is that we actually start to add one and one together, and that a safe work in my environment actually enhances the chance of having a secure and safe operation. That is not so spoken about before. It's just about all these matters of operational safety that we talk about, but not if anything happens and you don't want to, you don't dare to stand up or say anything, then of course the environment is not safe and that ends up in the operation in a negative way. So that I must say that when the leaders actually see this adds two and two together here, they will see that it's needed to be done. And also what I can say to a leader is that what you say matters. So please prepare, have a routine that you actually can act on. It's actually Cecilia says, if the policy is not based in how to act when it happens, then it's no use to having it, you know what I mean? So what we need to do is that we need to prepare, talk to other leaders about how would you act if this happens or that happens? So you have some kind of base to stand on when you have to act and you put your foot down or help a victim of harassment or so on and so forth. So be prepared. It's all about planning and interest and dedication.
Thank you. So preparation, time, and money will solve this.
Oh, agreed.
Thank you so much. I feel like we could have discussed this topic for several days, but now it's soon time to end this webinar, and I would like to thank all of our panelists and speakers and all of you who have been engaging also in the chat, and we will be able to answer your question also afterwards. It's been a very inspiring webinar with all the speakers and all the panelists that we heard having different things to say that we can do when we move forward. And let's keep these conversations going and work together to turn these insights into action for increased gender equality in the blue economy. We will all benefit from it. Thank you so much.